Hello, hello, and welcome. We're so happy to have you. My name is Abby. I'm your host. And today we're going to have a discussion around what a finance tech stack done right looks like with people who have been through it and are leaders in this space. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few things with you. First, you should see that you're automatically muted. If you would like to submit a question, please use the chat window to type it out. We'll try to get to these by the end of our 30 minutes together, but if we don't, we'll reply to you directly after this conversation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Omri Mor, the co-founder and CEO of Routable. In case you're unfamiliar, Routable is an accounts payable platform purpose-built to simplify mass payouts. We also have Tait, CEO of the accounting operations tech company Decimal. Decimal's focus is on the accounting operations for small businesses, specifically around bookkeeping, technology, and back office financial operations. And then last but not least, Toedt, the head of finance and strategy at CLI Studios, which is a venture-backed startup based in LA and the world's top online arts education platform. So without further ado, let's just dive right in. Erica, I'd love to start with you. You've held many roles at CLI Studios, and you've been with them since the beginning. But in the last few months, you all have been through some pretty big changes. Can you share a little bit about that and what you see as some of the biggest challenges facing AP teams today?
Yeah, thanks so much, Abby. I'm happy to be here. So I think just to start, one of the biggest changes that we went through in the last year is we just completely revamped our entire tech stack from accounting firm to accounting platform, AP platform, expense platform. And it was a massive, massive project. One of the hardest things that I think that I found with what was our existing platform is that it didn't really fit all of our needs. I think especially since the beginning of the pandemic, so many companies shifted, and the size of companies shifted, needs of the companies shifted, and we really found ourselves in a place where we were looking at what we were using and found that it didn't really fit us. And I think too, for me personally, there's this internal joke because we're a startup and we're a small team. I was like, oh, I'll go back to my team, but I am the team. And so I think a lot of smaller companies and a lot of companies through the pandemic don't have a lot of the time or resources or money to be able to put into developing or building out that infrastructure. And so when finding a new platform, you really want to find something that's going to be easier for you to onboard, easy for you to build and grow with. So I think those are some of the challenges that I found personally. And happy to kind of dive in a bit more if we need some more explanation there.
No, I think that was super insightful. I love that perspective. I'd also like to hear from Omri a little bit from his perspective. So thinking about what finance leaders should consider when evaluating different platforms, are there key things to think about when you're looking to streamline and automate workflows?
That's a great question. I like to start with what your process is and what's your process is going to look like in 18 months. And I'd love to get Erica and Matt's feedback on this too.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of finance teams are second-class citizens in the org. And I say that because they're just forced to fix whatever everyone else has done. Oh, we spent too much money. Oh, we didn't budget for this, but we have to do it. A lot of finance's day-to-day doesn't allow them to actually get their daily work done. And because of that, there's stress and there's a monthly close and you kind of can't get away from the requirements to do it. Usually when we talk to folks thinking about changing their processes from accounting to finance and so forth, we try to understand what are they doing today. But that's like a third of our conversation. 2/3 of our conversation talks about, are you happy with your accounting software? Are you going to be making a switch in the next 24 months? How many team members do you have on your finance team? What are their roles? Are you going to expand that? What kind of data do you need today? What kind of data will you need in the future? And we find out that a lot of folks that we talk to in finance are so boxed into what's happening right now that they don't have the capacity to think beyond that. And we might be able to spark the right conversations at the right time to help them realize, like, is Routable the right tool? If not, what is? I think it's a very, like, honest and empathetic conversation that starts with that. Beyond that, I think it's also having a question of where is your business model today and where is it moving into the future. A lot of our customers are switching to Routable because their business model changed. Maybe how they move money changed. Maybe their vendor relationships have changed, and that really matters. So it's funny, but you were talking about how does a company scale? How do you record money movement? And how do you grow your just general, like, business operations? And I never said AP once in that, right? I think that's what's really interesting. Accounts payable should help you check the boxes against that. But first and foremost, you need to have an honest conversation about where your business is and where it's about to go, because that will tell you how AP will reflect. If we can help with that, we go kick butt. If we can't, I think it's good to have an honest conversation saying, we might not be the best solution. You should do more research on X, Y, and Z to figure out what you need to do to scale, because scale is the word that most of the time your leadership will think about, and your finance will be thinking in arrears about what happened. So getting finance and leadership to think about it the same way is really critical.
I see very good nods from both Erica and Matt. Anything that resonated there for you guys?
Something that stood out to me that Omri was saying is, I think finance people in an organization are always second-class citizens. And what's unique is how they get there is different too, depending on the type of organization. You rarely have people that kind of linearly go between organizations as a finance professional. They either work their way up to the CFO, or there's somebody who started in doing something generalized as an operations person and then took over this thing that quite frankly, everybody kind of hates this area of their business. And so somebody has to do it though. And it also isn't as easy as it sounds. Yeah, I think Omri has the really right perspective. It's an operational thing, but we call it accounting. And within that though, each organization in today's world needs somewhere between 5 and 15 different software products to run their accounting operations. And how you pick those solutions, how you integrate those solutions, and what you have to do within those solutions directly impacts how easy or how hard it is to do the work today and scale for tomorrow. So that's kind of what stood out to me as Omri was talking.
Yeah, and in that vein, how do the integrations affect the workflows there?
I think particularly because of how so many people come to accounting operational work, that they just become okay doing things ways that we don't ever do them in our daily lives. Accounts payable is a great example. I can't tell you how many companies still actually write checks. And you laugh and you ask them, do you do it in your personal life? And they don't. And then they start to connect those dots in their head. But that's also only one aspect of accounting operations. There's so much manual work and data entry that's involved in just accomplishing what needs to happen to pay your bills, get paid, track it all. It is absolutely crazy. And the integrations run well. So the technology in and of itself working together is a core foundational element, but the processes of how to do that and work within those systems and check to make sure the trains are running on time, or in this case, the numbers, is equally as important. And I think oftentimes forgotten about within organizations.
Just a quick comment to add to that. We were on a call earlier this week, and a company was changing their business model, and they were going to build an in-house tool to help QuickBooks do something. And we just told them that that feature that they want to is available in NetSuite and not in QuickBooks. And we said, hey, how critical is this change of your business model? And then how critical is to account for it? And they were like, well, we're changing everything. We're pivoting our business model. Like they have already decided, it was communicated to their board. It was like, they can't go backwards, but they were planning on actually asking for operations and engineering to try to build this in-house. And I was like, oh no, like this is a standard feature. You just need to think about how to account for it. That's the word, accounting. And once I told them that and I showed them, I pulled up NetSuite and I was like, hey, this is how you do it in QuickBooks, limited data. Here's how you do it in NetSuite. And I don't know if NetSuite is the right solution for them, but it was just a recommendation saying that this is available. You just have to think about it from a finance perspective. And it was an aha moment. And they realized that they really need to think about how to move money first, and then get the tools and make sure the tools talk together. And then they should continue, rather than like define a new process, build an internal tool and an internal process that will only be private to them and would actually make them unable to scale. It was a really fun conversation. And regardless or not if they use Routable, I think we just provided them enough value to say, there's a light at the end of the tunnel if you take a left here, rather than just saying, keep going down this tunnel and, try to just power through it.
Yeah, I saw Matt's grimace as you were describing what they were talking about doing. He was just like, no, thank you.
Well, we send Matt clients when they're like, hey, we need to do this. And we're like, oh no, this is already a feature that's available. Yeah. You just don't understand accounting software as well enough. And that's okay. Most people are coming into it from I need to do this yesterday. So they don't have the time to research it. And I think that's where it's great to partner with someone like Decimal and say, hey, we know the ins and outs of these tools. We're going to recommend the best tool for the best time for the best company. Trust us, right? You do need that advisory side to say, we're pros in accounting and accounting operations. Let's help you do the right thing.
Yeah, I love that. And well, Matt, you've spent time with hundreds of small businesses at this point for sure. I'd love to hear from you on how you have seen automation enable small finance teams to actually scale their operations.
That's a great question. And I bet Erica feels this every day. No matter how big an organization is, financial operations and accounting operations is always resource constrained. There's always more to do than people are willing to pay for, because they'd rather pay for other things. And so it's one of the reasons that I think impacts these types of organizations is you want to figure out how to do as much as possible right with as few resources as possible. And then you kind of want to hedge your bets by 10 to 20% so that you can make up for whenever you make a little bit of a mistake. And that's the pressure that's put on an organization and the people within an organization that have that have to do this, that have the accountability towards accomplishing these tasks within an organization. And it's where you also have to break the functions down for what an accounting need is for a company. And every business needs actually 3 types of accounting. You need somebody to do your taxes, you need high-level strategic advice, and then you need accounting operations. And people often blend those together in the wrong ways, which also makes it harder for the operational part, because the operational part is what you actually have to do to not go to jail and exist as a company. Really dramatic things that get overlooked because you just assume they'll happen. And so the automation side is the magnifier and the amplifier of what can be accomplished if done well. And very few organizations really take the time to set it up well and then evolve. I heard a great quote about go-to-market strategy this week that I think applies really well to a growing organization's accounting operations. And that is, you never actually achieve success. It evolves constantly. So you have to constantly be evolving it. And reaching that kind of evolutionary viewpoint on your organization is important to making sure that you're always accomplishing your goals using the automations and the processes around them to continue to do it right and well.
I like that evolutionary perspective. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Erica, yeah, it was good. Erica, I'd love to hear from you. What are, in your opinion, some of the best practices that, Matt's alluded to some. I'd love to hear from you directly. What would you recommend for finance teams evaluating everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate this conversation, and then you just see me nodding my head, and we all have our own analogies. And the one I have at my job is that we're the stepsister. So in Cinderella, the whole finance and accounting team is the stepsister. And so I just wanted to share that because I think that resonates. It resonates with me, and I think everybody out there that's in this kind of department. But yeah, it was really challenging to start, honestly, because where we were was not going to work for us, probably even for the next year. And so I was in a position where I put a lot of pressure on our CEO and COO to make these changes. And when I first started, I said, okay, well, what are we going to change? We're going to change everything. And then I started mapping it out visually, because I'm a very visual person. So I said, what is our current state and what is our future state, ideally, right? And then I started mapping, okay, how do we make these changes? What are the in-betweens that we need to do to get from a current state to a future state? And also, that future state is not just 1 year from now, it's 3 years from now, it's potentially 5 years from now, because I don't want to go through this again in 12 months, 24 months, or maybe even 3 years, right? The partners that you're going to work with, you want to be able to work with long term. And so that was a big piece of it. And, when evaluating platforms, there are definitely differences in platforms. And I think Routable is unique in a lot of ways. And I'll get into that a bit. But one of the things that was my focus was also the people. If I'm going to be working with these companies on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, I want to make sure that we work together well. That when there's something, when there's an issue, or when maybe we want to develop something new, or I have a new use case that I need to solve for, that I'm able to go to them and we're able to navigate and figure something out. And so people for me was definitely a big part of it. Obviously cost factors into it. When looking at an AP platform, for me, one of the challenges that I found for my company is that we work with a lot of contractors. We're an arts education platform, and every artist that we bring in to film with is considered a contractor. And so I have to solve for hundreds and in the thousands potentially of contractors that we work with every year. And how do we migrate, our standalone payout process for contractors with our vendor process, merge them into one, and try to make something that is just easier, not just for me, but for whoever this is going to transition to. And so it was taking a look at that and kind of puzzle piecing all of that together, as well as just having systems talk to each other, which Matt and Omri talked about, but just how does our accounting platform work with our AP platform, work with our expense platform, and really making sure that everything is as streamlined as possible. And so honestly, that work took me, from talking to vendors and just being able to get information, get demos, get costs. The other thing I did was I did an all-in cost analysis where I said, okay, these are after talking to all these vendors, here are my top 3 accounting companies, top 3 accounting platforms, top 3 AP platforms, top 3 expense platforms, and pros and cons of each, costs of all of each, and put everything together and made different paths for us and said, okay, well, if we did this one, and this one, here's what our all-in cost looks like for year 1, year 2, and year 3. Because sometimes there's implementation costs, then there's transaction costs, there's all these different things. And so I went through this whole process, which, it took me maybe 3 months to do. But then I had all of that information, right? And now I knew what my recommendation was, and I could go to, our CEO and say, this is what we need to do. But it's not easy. It's very time consuming, but when you also find the right people and partners to work with it, that process does become easier, because they can also help you and make recommendations, as Omri said, right? If he thinks Routable is not the right fit, he wants you to be successful. So
I just want to cover a few things. One, it's really interesting. Like you're talking about investing 3 months to save 3 years, essentially, or to make the next 3 years easier. We talk to a lot of folks during tax season and say, hey, we can help you collect your, W-9 info. And one of the funniest things that we still try to do is to help someone understand if you implement Routable in the beginning of the year, the rest of the year is easier, rather than saying like, let's talk in Q3. And that's one of the things that like from, a marketing and just a general messaging perspective, we're trying to articulate better and better, because even if I can save you 30 seconds per process, over time that compounds and it really matters. The other thing on like the longevity of stuff, one of the really interesting things that we saw earlier when we built the platform was we know finance is going to change processes. It's going to get more complex, and you're more than likely going to change your accounting system every 3 years. So then, you're trying to build for everywhere, right? A tool that you can rely on for a decade plus. So you're trying to figure out how can you actually help people transition? Like we have someone that's transitioning right now from over 5,000 payables a month on QuickBooks to NetSuite, but they were confident that they don't have to switch Routable. I think that's one of those things where previously you switch AP systems when you switch accounting systems. And one of the biggest things that we try to do is to say, if you actually like this, let's help you continue with that longevity. The other point that I want to hit on is people. Like when we started the company, we did a bunch of research and we just found out that like the average response time in customer support is like 7 days, like globally in the industry. So we're like, okay, like how can we do the extreme opposite and have live chat available? Because even beyond like the relationship that we have, right, and the partnership, when you're talking about money movement or a month-end close or just anything in AP or the business payment ecosystem, when the problem is now, it's now. And if there's a confusion, you need to clear it up. And if there's a problem, you need to solve it. And the faster you can react to that and just say that we're there, even if we cannot solve it within 5 minutes, right? I think it's really important to just say like, hey, dear Erica, we recognize you, we understand, we're going to communicate, and we're going to come back. I think that's a really critical part of service offerings that is often forgotten about when we're talking about finance tools. Mm-hmm. It's like, look, every finance person is going to be the biggest expert in their business, but sometimes just having an extra hand to say, I'm empathetically listening to you and I'm aware is really, really critical.
Two things going to stand out that I want to mention really quickly. Number one that Omri said is the overall customer experience in anything accounting operations, on the tooling side to the vendor side of people that actually do accounting operations, is absolutely horrendous as an industry in general. I can tell you, we have an entire yelling channel in Slack about what it's like to call QuickBooks support. As an industry, the idea of white glove service just doesn't exist, which also doesn't make sense to me. It's one of the reasons why we really align well with Routable, and our customer base uses a lot of different solutions for a lot of different things, but we really align well with Routable for two reasons that Omri just talked on. One is the people and the customer experience is absolutely unbelievable. Number two, the API first approach allows for the flexibility as organizations grow to be able to both change accounting systems and change other systems, and getting back to that integration and automation, and also be able to do things their own way as necessary if they have that need, which is an extremely important, I think, under talked about thing, particularly when you're talking about growing companies, tech companies, even e-commerce brands, that I think is really important. And sorry, that just stood out to me, and I wanted to say that really quickly.
I loved it. Thank you so much. I like that. One thing that I'm thinking about here, just trying to give more like a tactical something for someone to take away here. With Erica, you've mentioned a few things about like evaluating your processes and everything, taking that 3 months. You had to get other stakeholders involved. You had your CEO, you had like your CTO, you had other folks. How did you get buy-in, and what tips do you have for that?
Yeah, I don't know if I was in a unique position. Who we were with before had their own proprietary platform, which handled our AP and expense and everything. So when I when I made the decision that we had to change accounting firms, it allowed me to change everything else. We had to, right? But I still had to get them on board with making that change in the first place. And so, what I did was, as part of my, I suppose, like research into, taking a look at other platforms early on in that, I could already see the path of how much easier this is going to be, not just for me personally, but for us as a company. It's going to release potentially like hours and hours of work each month. It helps with our month-end close process. Maybe you don't see like the actual dollar back, but you see the dollar back in my time or in our team's time. Yeah. And therefore I can then spend time on other things that are actually more valuable to the company. And so part of this kind of all-in cost analysis that I had started, sure, there were actual numbers in it, but that started out with what is the cost benefit of actually making these changes, in the short term and also in the long term. And as a company, this makes the most sense for us, because also if we get put in a position where we don't make this change a year from now, what we use today actually won't sustain us. We're going to be in a worse position because it's going to be harder for us to transition. And so I think that explaining that in a really like transparent way was very helpful, but also coming to them not with a, hey, we have a problem, can you guys solve? It was, this is what I'm doing. This is my plan to solve this. I want you to give me the okay to do this research. I'm going to come back to you when I have the solution and make sure that you guys are on board, right? That was the plan. And I think that having that solution going to them, not just bringing the problem, allowed me the room to be able to do the things that I needed. And also, like I showed them, you make like pretty PDFs and things like that of this is current state, this is future state, here's now cost, here's future cost. You do all these things and you show them, the benefit to the company. And, if there is that benefit to the company, they're not going to say no, right?
Yeah.
Because they believe in it. And also if they believe in you, if, a company has value in their people, they're going to trust what I'm telling them. And I think that was really important. But it's definitely a bit of give and take, because then it's like, what's the budget and this and that. So there is the back and forth there. But I think that going to them with the plan, with the solution is definitely a huge part of it.
You have to be proactive for sure. Yeah, I love that. Matt, what are some of the best practices that you've seen among your client base that you could recommend?
I'd say number one, just take notes on what Erica said today and do exactly that. Seriously, I mean, we've talked to hundreds and thousands of businesses over the last couple of years since we launched, and I've rarely run into somebody that's done that much detailed work. And so really taking the time to understand the nuances around all the aspects of accounting operations and all the processes and all the players and people involved will only be beneficial and helpful as you move forward. And then number two is don't settle. So many people settle for just getting it done. And it's like this warm body solution, and it always ends up being wrong. Our sales team loves the fact that every 3 months we can cycle back on a no and it becomes a yes a lot. And it's because people just are willing to settle for this really low bar of accounting firms and bookkeepers that they assume will do better, and they should do better. And everybody deserves better. And the tools are out there like a Routable to really help solve this problem. And that's what I would really recommend for people is take a page out of Erica's book, and then don't settle, but really figure out what you want and find somebody that'll help you achieve that.
Band-aids only work for so long. You can sticky things together and eventually you're going to have to fix the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, I think we hear something similar where, let's say someone's just like happy cutting checks by hand or going to their bank portal, typing stuff in, exporting it, and then uploading to QuickBooks. We can do that programmatically. That's not the magic. I think what is really interesting, they'll be like, yeah, you know what, we decided that we don't want to spend extra money on this, and we're just going to continue doing what we're doing. And at some point, you just can't argue with them because that is familiar. I think settlement happens because you're saying it's fuzzy. Like there's a sense of like, I know how to do this. It works. The problem is when you need to switch because that scale or that issue happens, you haven't prepared yourself, right? When that pain point goes from like a Advil level pain to a morphine level pain, it persists. And I think that's kind of one, and we get that email back too, Matt, where someone's like, yeah, we're just going to stick with our current practices. We're good. And then they come back to us and be like, hey, how fast can we set this up? And I think it's because they weren't just like empathetic to themselves and their peers in what's happening next. I feel like accounting and finance is finally in a spot where people understand that there's ops like rev ops, like you can't have a sales team and a customer success team without a revenue operations team helping make sure that Salesforce is talking to other systems the right way. We're finally at a point where there should be always budget to make sure that your tools are talking the right way and that you have advisory of tool making it the right way. Because Erica, even if you pick the right tools, you want an expert in that tool. And that can come from someone like Matt's team at Decimal, but also from our team, right? We need to be equally as versed in your accounting software as we were versed in Routable. And then we need to be empathetic and aware of your business model to be able to talk to you, right? So that means that we have to do way more than software just to understand what happened today and how we can help you move forward.
Well, and I think there's a reason that Decimal calls it accounting operations. Everybody thinks this is an accounting problem. The software does the accounting for the most part. There are very little accounting things. Accounting for an SMB is the endpoint of a bunch of operational processes. The better you handle those individual operational processes and tools, the easier the accounting becomes. To the Band-Aid versus solving the real problem.
I agree with you. I feel like now we're at a point that we need to have a 7-part webinar solving each problem. Erica needs to take out her 3 months of work and if you were me, we need to now reach out to Masterclass and be like a masterclass with Erica and Matt on solving your operational shit show,
Seriously, yeah. I could not agree more. Thank you everyone for your time. We are at time for today. So on behalf of Routable and our presenters, thank you to everyone who has joined us, and we hope to see you next time. So have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you.